All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. Today we are diving into the question, can you trust AI to catch every threat? This session will explore the critical questions organizations should consider before they fully embrace AI. My name is Carolyn Kushwa, and I am a marketing content specialist here at Cofense. I'm excited to be joined by our expert panel, Josh Bartolome, our Chief Security Officer, Jason Muir, our Senior Technical Product Manager, and James Hickey, Principal Sales Engineer. Before we get started, I wanted to give a quick note on logistics. This session is being recorded and will be available on demand on our website over the coming days. We encourage you to submit your questions throughout the discussion in the Q&A window in your console. If there are any questions we don't have time to address today, we will be following up with them via email after the webinar. So let's just jump right in. To start, I'd like to ask, how can organizations effectively balance the speed and efficiency of AI with the critical need for human oversight in cybersecurity? Josh, if you want to start off taking this one, feel free.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a great question. And there's a lot of different angles from it. I mean, there's an administrative side, which is understand what the AI does and doesn't do, understand how it's trained, what it excels at versus what it's just okay at. It really just comes back to the trust but verify. And that goes through the contracts, look at the derivatives insofar as how is the models trained, what data are you providing that the models might be using, what's their, like I said, they're kind of their focus areas, what's their accuracy rates, their retraining times, because models have to be updated, right? And what I've seen work a lot in the past is, like I said, trust but verify. So spot check. Don't just blindly trust. That gives a false sense of security. So if you're leveraging AI, do your proof of concepts, your proof of value evaluations, and even after you put it in production, do a 10-20% validation with a human analyst, with somebody just verifying that they are still working as you expected them to. So all goes back to trust but verify.
I'll add to that. The human in the loop is a proven methodology for integrating AI into a lot of things. Having someone there to actually review what the AI is actually doing and what the results are is critical to understanding how well the AI is actually performing for you. Obviously, you can run calculations, you can get precision, recall, F1 scores, all of those types of things from your AI models to understand, are they actually being effective? But having a human there to actually look at it, especially in the context of security, is a very important aspect of it. So just that component of it alone is a very great way to integrate AI into an existing security operations center.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, we hear quite a bit from our customers who, they're keen to implement more automation in, in their whole kind of phishing defense strategy. And, whilst that's obviously a good idea, wherever possible, what you do see is that some people are just handing over this responsibility to the technology, right? And I think, as Josh and Jason have just explained quite concisely, that doing that, just leaving it 100% to the technology, generally isn't a good idea, right? Because there are things that it's going to miss. And we see that, right? We see that in our customer environments every day, because we have customers who have these technologies and, and we're still here, kind of cleaning up the mess, if you like, behind, what some of these solutions leave behind. So yeah, I think it's very important, obviously speed and efficiency and automation is what everyone's looking for. But the message really is always that you don't want to forget the human oversight. You have to find a way to have that in the process somewhere, because just trusting the AI 100% is going to lead to problems.
Yeah. And I'll add to that, on top of that, you are actually losing some of your intelligence within your organization if you are fully trusting an AI solution to just do everything for you. You don't actually look at what the threats are that are affecting your organization. So that's like a blind spot that may be introduced by some of that full automation that needs to be addressed. And that's where that human in the loop, coming back to that, really is an important aspect of AI integration.
Yeah, it's really, don't fall into the trap of action without context.
Right.
Before and after the action. So you know what's going on, why, and how it could impact you or your organization.
Awesome. I think you guys might have gone into this a little bit here, but our next question is, what are the limitations of AI in terms of phishing defense? and how can they be mitigated? So Jason, if you want to go into a little bit of what you were just discussing, maybe get into the mitigation as well, that'd be great.
Yeah, we touched on that just a little bit, but really honestly, there's plenty to talk about there. AI itself has plenty of practical applications. There's a new focus on generative AI, and that is a great technology, but that's not necessarily the best AI for every solution. Understanding what the AI application is a very important aspect of all of this. Being precise about your application of algorithms or math to a specific problem makes a big difference, because if you're just sort of abstracting and going towards LLMs to do, non-deterministic things, that's not necessarily precision, right? You need to have that precision inside of there. So going back to AI and sort of like what negatives there can be and what positives there can be too, right? Because I don't want to talk about it in just a negative context. The negatives of it are that you are, again, this goes back to the trusting it, but not really understanding what it's doing. If you're not there to understand if the AI is actually working for you or not, and you're just getting the numbers from the system that says, hey, we've quarantined the 5 billion emails, but what is the actual accuracy of that? What am I getting out of there? Am I getting IOCs out of that data for myself to look inside of my organization? A lot of these systems just sort of automatically get rid of things for you, but they don't necessarily enrich your intelligence or your security operations center with what has been found. So that, I think, is a negative side of this, where people have sort of given into the automation because, well, everyone's got cost constraints. That's understandable. Everyone has resource constraints too. But giving up that control really sort of introduces a blind spot for a lot of organizations. So I keep going back to the human in the loop aspect of it all.
Yep.
It's really important. It's an important aspect of understanding, is the AI system actually working for us? Is it doing what we expect it to do? Does it need to be tuned? Do I need to go back in and make adjustments? Like, all of these things are very important questions that you have to ask throughout the entirety of an AI lifespan, right? If you're using a model, it's going to stay static, and you need to make sure that you're adjusting for what it actually produces. So
Okay.
blind spots, but then you can also have all the benefits, right? The automation is a really big play for everyone. And we do want to provide automation. We want intelligent automation, though. We want human verified automation that actually ensures that what it's doing is exactly what you expect. So.
And to add on to that, I mean, everything Jason said is 100%. And it really does go back to that trust but verify, right? And I think one of the biggest concern, which to me is a limitation with phishing, AI for phishing specifically, is a lot of individuals will get a false sense of security. Oh, we just implemented this thing. Now we don't have to do any type of email analysis anymore ourselves, because it's blocking everything that it's blocking. But to Jason's point, are you getting the context as to why was it blocked? What factors caused the block? Because maybe it was gray mail. It wasn't really bad, but maybe it was the CEO was waiting for that email. Now they didn't get it, right? So it's kind of that. And, AI is fantastic, to Jason's point. We've leveraged it in multiple ways within Cofense. We, used it ourselves personally. But it always comes back to, it's only as good as the data that's put into it. So AI can only do like an nth degree of variation in what it's detecting. Attackers are innovating so fast now because they're leveraging AI for just random generation of stuff, right? That the AI models for detection need that human intervention. They need that real-time kind of that training, that repeated updating, the cycles to the models themselves to account for all of the net new that's happening, because they're not always getting to that extra nth degree of identification because things are changing just so fast right now.
No, I mean, I again come back to the precision idea. So, I talk about this in terms of examples that we see in everyday customer environments, right? So, and a lot of this is to do with the way that AI solutions are constructed. So they have this very clever idea of, or some of them do, some have this very clever idea of social graph analysis, right? So the idea is that we can build a map or a model of how every individual in the organization usually works, right? Who do they normally deal with? Who do they normally get emails from? And all this kind of stuff. And that's great. It does a very good job. But the problem is, there are things that get through that analysis, right, from a phishing standpoint. And I can call out two specific examples. There's what I call the DocuSign type email, right? So essentially, threat actors are using trusted platforms to send malicious links in documents from an official DocuSign platform, right? So social graph analysis sees that and says, well, this user normally gets emails from DocuSign, and getting one of those at 3 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon is perfectly normal, right? But what it doesn't understand is that the link in the document that's being sent is malicious, right? So it sees that and it just lets it through. So we see those kind of emails in our customer environments who have these kinds of solutions in place, right? They just sail through because the social graph analysis cannot determine that email is in fact malicious, right? The other one is supply chain attacks, right? So if you deal with somebody, in a third party, and they get compromised and the threat actor uses their infrastructure to send you malicious links, your social graph analysis is not going to see that, right? You normally get emails from that third party at 4 p.m. on Tuesday. It doesn't know the difference, right? And therefore it's not doing is bringing intelligence to bear as part of this overall AI analysis, right? And then the third aspect to that is, whilst those are two good examples of the kind of things that get through those solutions, the other aspect is it doesn't matter what technology solution you're using, if something gets through, it can't alert you to that fact, right? The so-called false negative problem, right? It's never going to be able to tell you that it's missed something. It's like, oh, well, that was a bad email, but I didn't see it. It's like, if it could do that, it would have stopped it. So again, that's why you see these things, coming through. So if all you're going to do is rely on the AI, this stuff is going to get through and you're not going to know that it's getting through. And therefore it's a threat to the end users in your organization.
And one last thing to just kind of wrap this one up too. Everything James and Jason said 100% agreed with. And I actually have a real example of some of this situation. So one of my teams, I actually head up the managed services within Cofense, managed phishing defense and response. So our team's analyzing, hundreds of thousands of emails, every single week. And one of our customers, just use an example, I'm not using any names, the numbers are representative sampling. One of our customers a few months ago, outside of their secure email gateway, they got an additional email filtering system, an ICES inline for filtering. We do a couple different types of measurements, how we manage and what we report in. And usually it's how many emails are reported from that customer's employees and what's that percentage of reported emails, how many of those are malicious, right? So again, just round numbers here, which are relative to the percent, but say on an average month, this customer reports 1,000 emails. And of that 1,000, 10%, 100 emails were malicious. After they implemented this additional inline, the percent of or the number of emails went down from 100 malicious to around 20, 25. Significant drop, right? And great by all respects, and it's fantastic. And under the assumption that what they blocked was solid. The customer, because they're managed services, they have our, the Cofense. I'm not a salesperson, obviously, but they have the Cofense intelligence, and they have our vision product, which helps us doing searches and quarantines in your email stores. For last month and one of the recent months, they, between the Cofense managed services and our intelligence, we quarantined over 1,000 emails in that customer's environment that weren't blocked. So that goes back to that false sense of security, trust but verify, and know, how the retraining is. And that goes back to kind of that narrative of the threats change all the time. You can't be relying on just the one thing.
That's awesome. Those are great insights. Thanks, everyone. Our next question is a little bit different. It's how can organizations ensure transparency and maintain control over their own data when adopting some of these AI-driven cybersecurity tools? James, do you think you could take that one?
Yeah, so I mean, this is kind of like the holy grail, right, of automation. It's how do I automate, whilst at the same time retaining all of the transparency and all of the control over the data that I'm using. And I think that it's quite difficult to do if you're going out with a kind of a third-party AI-powered solution. Again, coming back to say the social graph analysis example, some of the models, they're built from the data that is found in your environment, right? And on the one hand, that's good in the sense that you're using a lot of data to build the model, so the model can become more effective. But I would imagine if you're a heavily regulated organization, right, and you have specific requirements around understanding, where is your data, like where is it being processed, how is it being processed, right? If that data, ends up in a central model that is being utilized to kind of build capability around the AI, and that model is then distributed throughout the system, so to speak, to power that solution in all customer environments, at that point, you've kind of lost control of the data, right? Now, for some organizations, that won't matter. But as I say, if you're heavily regulated, it might do. And we certainly hear on the, from the customer side of things, talking to people that, one of the things they like, they really interested in the automation side and the things that AI can deliver in that sense. But they are worried about, well, where does the data go, right? And how is it happening? So yeah, I think, maintaining that level of control whilst achieving the sort of automation that AI purports to offer, I think is actually quite a very fine balancing act. And I think it's something that people are having to look a lot harder at right now, right, to try and understand, how to deal with that. So, I mean, perhaps, Josh, you can kind of explain a little bit about maybe how we sort of solve that problem.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to documentation. It's in your contracts, and it's with having those security checklists, those security conversations with your vendor, with the entity offering the AI or leveraging the AI, specifically asking those questions, right? What data are you collecting? How are you using it? Where is it stored? How are you anonymizing it, redacting it, and in implementation, is it reversible insofar as if somebody hacked the model, right? Or they got in and they grabbed the model or they grabbed something, can they extrapolate me as a customer? And there are security compliance controls for all of the above as well. Whether it's SOC 2 compliance, NIST 853, they're doing some overlays as we speak. You have, the variety of GDPR, even HIPAA. There's a lot of different compliance requirements with how things are handled, encrypt and access control. So it really just comes down to having that documented. As much as a lot of us are, exhausted, I guess is the best way of saying, of managing our own and having to send out to vendors, right? Here's a security questionnaire before we can go through the procurement process. It's required. I mean, that's how you identify what the setup is, what your risks are, and how to hold your vendor to task, for lack of a better word, right? That they're doing what they said they did, because now it's in the contract. Now it's a contractual obligation for management, security, control, and visibility of how often is my data used. Have an exception process. How long is the data retained? Raw data versus aggregate data. There are a lot of different types of checklists around there. So you obviously got to work within your organization, find out what your risk thresholds are and what your preferences are from a security stance. But there's usually a good set of 20 to 30 types of questions that are fairly standard nowadays. What are you grabbing? How are you grabbing it? Where you're storing it? What's your controls? What happens if? And what's your breach notifications in context?
From my side, I actually have a slightly different perspective because I'm the product manager for the PDR suite of tools. I actually ask myself those questions from the customer perspective. When we're building something that's an AI solution, I want to make sure that we're actually addressing the problem specifically, and that we're also ensuring that we're doing everything we can to make sure that that data stays in the customer's hands. One of the things that we recently released this year was the AISF feature, and that specifically addressed the spam problem inside of Triage. The whole point of that system was to be able to allow for the end users to be able to train the model themselves with their own data and leverage that data on host. This doesn't leave the system at all. It stays completely encased inside of their application and is a actual AI model built off of what has been learned inside of their environment. That was a very, narrow, targeted, focused AI effort. And we continue to do that internally. Anything that we're building that's an AI system, we ask all of those same questions. We want to ensure that when we build something like this for our customers, we're always taking that into consideration. We always look at how private is it? Are they going to be leaking any data? How secure is it all? We want to make sure that we're giving you accuracy too. We don't want to provide you with just AI slop. We want to give you something that actually is usable and can potentially be integrated with some tuning into your existing workflows. I think that, understanding all of those things from, your perspective, obviously as a customer, you need to know all of those things, but I think the vendors do too, because we need to start taking this very seriously. And the way that we talked about AI to our customers needs to be open. We need to talk about it in an open manner with clarity and with honesty about how the system actually works.
Absolutely. And one add to that, Jason, absolutely great point. It made me think of something as well. I obviously here I'm on the vendor side, but I mean, I was a buyer for 20 years, right, of tech. And don't be shy. Ask. Like Jason, companies get excited explaining what they do, how they do it, the controls they put in place, how it's secure. Ask the questions. If they start hedging on the answers, well, that's an indicator. Right? How do you do security? Yes. No, not what I asked. Right? So just like Jason said, he just outlaid. We're looking into this. We're making sure we have this, we have this, we have this. Vendors that are implementing these things that are. I'm not saying vendors are bad, obviously, right? But if they're not answering your questions, go with your gut. Right? But ask the questions. Don't be shy. These things aren't inexpensive. You have limited budgets. You got limited time. I've worked with CISOs, heads of security, SecOps, directors in the past, and they're like, "Well, they said it was this, but I didn't want to ask this." No, ask everything you can. Get to the nth, right, degree if you need to. If you're not comfortable, make sure you have a comfort level with what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Awesome. Josh, I think you actually touched on this a little bit, but I have another question here about with AI solutions requiring extensive data collection, how can organizations ensure that they're compliant with the privacy regulations while maintaining effective phishing defenses? So kind of pulling more on that regulation side of everything. Can you kind of touch on that?
Absolutely. It really does come down to regulatory checklists and verifications, right? Trust but verify. Again, how is the data pulled? How is it anonymized? How is it redacted? Is it raw data? Is it aggregate data? A lot of these are either questions for the vendors, or if you're using your own internal models, part of your own acceptable use policy and usage guidelines within your organization on how AI should be used. Knowing where the data is stored, how is it protected? If I'm uploading something to one, and I'm just rando saying names, this is anything specific, right? Chat GPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever. Where's that data going? How is it being protected? Is it tied to me specifically? So if there is some type of prompt injection attack or something along those lines, can they find out that I personally sent that in? Again, those are checklists. Checklists don't necessarily mean that you're protected. You got it. It's fine. You're good. Now, it provides you with a mechanism if something goes wrong. You have recourse, right? Obviously, it's a best effort. You hope that everything that's said, but things happen. The way the world is right now, breaches happen, things happen, but it's going in eyes wide open. And that's where a lot of the checklists come in. Like I said, it's how is the data encrypted? How is it isolated? What methods of redaction do you leverage? What types of data are you redacting and aggregating or not aggregating and throwing out? What's your retention of the data? How is that data used within that? And all of that maps to your SOC 2 compliance, like I was saying, HIPAA regulation in regards to data visibility and availability versus, redactability for data sharing. What are their procedures for a data breach? That should all be in the MSSAs, the SOWs, the contracts, and related checklist languaging. If AI vendor has a data breach, what's the notification? What's the response? What's the kind of requirement and the depth? What's the timeframes? This is really about the T's and C's, going through the paperwork, ensuring everybody's on the right page, and the ins and the outs of your data and the data in general that they have access to, and not even just what they're using for their models, but what they have access to. Because even though they're not using it, if they have access, that's still a concern. And you need to know what they could do with that data, even if they're not accessing it today.
Yep. I would say that, it really depends on the organization too. Every organization out there is going to be under different compliance standards, right? Health is going to be under HIPAA, and then we have GDPR out for Europe, and then even California, there's a privacy concern. So looking at that from that perspective, you have to consider that. We obviously look at that from the perspective of how can we address the total market? So we look at it, how do we remove things like HIPAA stuff? How do we remove stuff that would break California privacy standards? All of those things are sort of stacked together when we look at our data and we use it for AI and ML. But like Josh said, it's all about just understanding what type of data are you sending and where is it going and exactly how is it being used. You may be in violation of your own compliance standards without even really knowing it if you don't really understand where that data is being sent. So,
And as the data owner too, you have the authority saying you can use this data, but not that data.
yep.
Right. So that's why that delineation of what data is being used and why is huge, because you can literally say, no, you can use this data from like email data, right? Just arbitrary email data from this group, but not from the executive suite or our finance team. Right. I mean, you have that segmentation options when you work with a vendor, when you work with a service, and that's where you can delineate, your priorities and what's your critical assets or crown jewels, if you will, that you don't want to be a part of that. James, I apologize. I think you were going to jump in there.
Yeah, no, I was just going to sort of pull it back really to kind of what we try and provide, right? Which from our side is solutions that offer transparency around the stuff, right? So where we have AI model, the AI model and triage is specific to your instance and your environment and doesn't go anywhere. The work that we do, in terms of understanding threats, building our intelligence, obviously we use AI in that process, but again, that's central and doesn't go anywhere, right? And we can be very clear about exactly which bits of data we use and what we do with it. So we're always happy to explain to people how we do that. And the products and services that we use are essentially entirely transparent, right? In terms of even if you're running our managed service, you have the opportunity to log in to the platform that we use to provide that service, so you can see how we're actually processing and using your data, right? So you never actually lose control of it. And I think that's one of the things you've got to look at, right? Is your vendor providing a solution where something is going into a black box and you are losing control of it? Or are they providing you with something where you actually have access and you can see and you can truly understand the end-to-end process of what's happening to it, right? And for me, that's the difference. And it does matter these days.
Awesome. Thank you. My next question is, how does integrating human vetted threat intelligence compare to a fully automated system? And what advantages does it provide in real world phishing detection scenarios? Jason, do you want to take this one to start?
I'd be happy to, especially since my products address this, right?
Yeah.
So AI solutions versus human vetted intelligence. I think it's a bad idea to compare them, honestly, because I think that they are both discrete elements in a mature security operations center. If you're going to use AI, that's great. And, I think there's plenty of applications for that, which will help to reduce the burden on most security operations. But you need to also include that human intelligence. AI systems are nowhere near, artificial general intelligence, and they probably won't be there for a long time. Maybe when they do, they can do this job, but right now they cannot. So being discreet about how you apply your intelligence is important. The models themselves are going to be trained. They're going to be trained and have that snapshot in time taken. That is what it's deployed to most customer environments. Now, that snapshot in time is effective. It does work and it does stay there, at least for a few days. But as everyone who's in and doing phishing research can tell you, that change, that the tactics and the campaign styles change constantly. And in fact, they typically change within like 48 hours. So how good are those models at detecting the latest and greatest, iterations of whatever campaign they may be on? A lot of times what we find is that those models themselves, and Josh can absolutely speak to this, even with numbers, that those models seem to decay over a 2-week period before they ever get updated. Now, in that interim period, you have a pretty and a growing gap of knowledge as far as what is actually phishing, what is actually affecting your organization. So now this is where that human in the loop, not just for checking the AI system, but also doing the actual job of a security analyst to look at the stuff that their internal users are reporting to them as suspicious emails. Now, the AI system can get rid of some of the simple stuff, some of the known junk, some of the spam, some of all that stuff. But if it's already in your inbox, did it actually help you do that? No. So now, if an email's inside of the inbox, it has already bypassed all of your email vendor and your security vendor platforms to get into your user's inbox. What do you do with that? You have to report that in. You have to have someone look at that and say, hey, there's something wrong with this. And then you have to have someone actually determine, is it really wrong? Now that can go, and then you can respond back to your user. You're encouraging a positive reporting culture inside of your org, but then you can also take that data, and if you really wanted to, you can share that with your AI vendor, help them update the models. It's not going to address that gap, though. That's the problem. That's always going to be the problem, is that AI models are always going to trail, or that point in time snapshot is going to decay. So having humans along with AI makes the most sense, at least to me personally, but I think to a lot of people, it really does, strike a chord that is the right approach to actually dealing with the latest and greatest phishing threats, is to use AI, but don't trust it explicitly, because we all have seen that it doesn't work perfectly. Just constantly. So.
Every company has a threat profile and a threat landscape that's unique to them. There's obviously shared threats across the board, blah, blah, blah. But based on your industry, your size, your demographics, everything, a company's threat landscape and overall risk landscape is unique to that company. Blindly trusting, I shouldn't say blindly trusting, just trusting an AI to do it without actually capturing any of the human intelligence, to Jason's point earlier, you're losing that understanding of what your threat landscape as an organization is. And that's the determining factor that a lot of organizations use for how much do they invest in cybersecurity, what cybersecurity focuses our goal for this quarter, this half, this year. Whether is it denial of service, is it phishing attacks, is it malware, is it just CVEs and vulnerability management? That's how they allot their funds and their budgets for any given year. And if you have a gap in your understanding or the visibility, to Jason's point, visibility of your threat landscape, that could have repercussions, maybe not immediately, but year over year over year, and it just makes you that much more vulnerable. I actually quoted some numbers earlier, right? When I was talking about 1,000 emails, 25, on average 10%, and it was reduced, and how many we identified. That's all human vetted intelligence, right? So that was a couple of AI tools did determining identification of phishing emails, and validated them and blocked them, and that's fantastic. If our customers trusted just that, there's about 1,000 emails that would still be malicious emails that would still be sitting in mailboxes. But they went through and they said, we trust human vetted as well. Again, it's not an either or, really, it's an and. AI, thousands of fantastic uses and purposes. It's not a replacement. It's an augmentation.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I think the use of threat intelligence, I think, is a critically overlooked factor, and a lot of it is to do as well with what is the source of that intelligence, like how good is it, right? So you need a good source, and then you need some human vetting, right? And we spent many years building an effective engine at the center of Cofense that enables us to create and build exactly that kind of intelligence, right? And I guess the difference is in a lot of the kind of AI-based solutions, they're assessing an email based on a whole series of criteria, but they're not necessarily looking to do an IOC match, right? Now they'll talk about that as being a selling point, right? In the sense of, well, we're moving away from the use of intelligence and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, you can't beat really good quality, high fidelity, human vetted intelligence that can just look at something and say, well, that's bad, and we can take it out 100%, no questions asked, it's gone, right? In addition to the other side of things, which is then also having a set of processes, tools, and software to help you around just the human analysis, the human vetting, right? So in our view, the intelligence is critical, the human element is also critical, and then defining a set of processes around that allow you to move with real speed and with the accuracy that's necessary, right, when it comes to phishing. That's essentially what you want to be aiming for. So again, just sort of taking the AI and say, well, that automation is going to fix this for me, probably isn't the best strategy.
Right.
James, that's a great point about the human element, and I kind of want to follow up on that, which is and the question is, what role do end users play in phishing defense, and how can organizations kind of foster a stronger reporting culture to enhance that security posture? James, you want to kind of
Yeah, no, I mean, as Cofense, we've always said that the human being should be a critical part of any phishing defense strategy, right? Whatever you're doing, you have to involve the human being, because ultimately they are the last line of defense in your strategy, right? So if whatever it is that you have in a security perimeter and all the various solutions you might have fail, and you end up with a malicious email in an inbox, right? The only way that you're going to get visibility of that is if an educated user, looks at that and says, well, that doesn't look right. And, they have a method of being able to then tell the security team that email is in their inbox, right? So I mean, our strategy from day one has been around, engaging the human beings in the organization, right? Bringing that human intelligence into the picture, right? In addition to whatever automation you might be utilizing. And then, and doing what it is necessary to kind of build that effective reporting culture and the engagement with the end users that helps you build that and helps you back that up, right? So, and I think engaging with the end users, building a kind of a positive feedback loop into that reporting process is very important. People like to get feedback when they report something, rather than just hitting a button and it going into a black hole and then never actually getting anything back, right? That is how you engage users, and you can consistently reinforce the message that if there's something in there and you're not sure about it, then report it, right? Because it's an extremely important part of the overall cybersecurity posture for any organization. So yeah, I think it is, the human element of phishing defense is still extremely important, and you need a method of building that into whatever strategy you're going to deliver.
Absolutely. And I can say I observe that within our managed services every single day. From when we first onboard a customer and you look month over month in our managed services, when a customer's employer reports an email, our team analysts analyze it, and based on whatever category that they determine it is, it's safe, it's a credential phish, it's a malware laden email, it's a business email compromise, they always send a response back to the original reporter, so that person knows what they reported, one, was analyzed, and two, what the category of that analysis was. And what I've seen, and I've gone back too personally and looked at, customer just started and here's their percentages of malicious versus in total reported. Over time, 6 months, a year, that percentage of malicious generally starts, if you look at standard deviations and all that fun stuff, it does start to increase, which infers that you are training your employees to be more, to better identify threats and not just report in the email that just says, hey, there's cookies in the kitchen, right? I mean, so obviously I'm being a little cheeky there, but it's actually, to James's point, it's reinforcing that messaging to the employee of, thank you, that was clean, but really appreciate the vigilance. That was absolutely bad. And it's pattern recognition is a lot of it. It's not always look at the grammar. So I'm just using pattern recognition as general, but it gives them a sense of ownership. And we found that it just helps report in, which kind of addresses all the things that we've talked about, human vetted versus AI as well.
Yep. Yeah. And so going back, obviously I run the PDR suite of tooling and I enable that entire communication chain, the reporting, the review, and then the response back to the end users, which encourages that particular aspect of it all. Now, within my product suite, I'm incorporating AI. Let's go back to AI real quick. But the AI is used only as an automation. It's really important that when you have a phishing defense setup, that you have AI with HI, human intelligence. It's absolutely necessary. AI covers maybe 80 to 85% of things. It's the human intelligence that's going to save you in the end. You have to have that end user reporting in the stuff that made it past your AI, made it past your IOC map, made it past everything that you already had in place, to look at it and then feed that back in. Eventually, it may go into the AI system, and then it can be detected in the future. But without the aspect of this all, you're never going to catch that. It will sit in there. It may get executed, and you may get compromised. You have to have users actually looking at it, people who understand what is a normal email flow to them, to their mailbox, and they can pick up on the nuanced differences that maybe AI models can't do right now. And they can see that this just doesn't seem right, or this person doesn't normally send this type of thing to me. The AI system probably wouldn't know that. So that is, again, it's really critical to have that human intelligence looking at the actual emails in their inbox with the context of who they are. And then also incorporating that into the rest of the systems together. AI is a great tool, but it is not the be all end all tool to help with phishing defense.
Yeah, I mean, the quick, context that I've heard said in the past was HI, to Jason's acronym there. HI is the last mile for security.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Josh, Jason, and James for these insights. Now we're going to go ahead and kick off a couple questions and answers. So any questions that have been put in the question box, we will answer those now.